Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something humanity has obsessed over for, well, literally centuries, defining exactly what it means to be fair. It's one of those concepts we all just intuitively feel in our bones, right? But actually putting it into practice? Yeah, that's a whole different story. We're going to trace this incredible journey, starting way back with ancient philosophy, moving through some seriously groundbreaking thought experiments, and finally ending up at the modern human rights frameworks that shape our world today.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today, taking us from abstract theories all the way to international law, so here's our roadmap. 1. The meaning of justice. 2. The veil of ignorance. 3. Justice as fairness. 4. The pragmatic pivot. And 5. The architecture of rights. Let's jump right in.
All right, Section 1, the meaning of justice. Let's see how the ancient thinkers tried to lay the foundational principles for a fair society. So what does it actually mean to be fair? It's a problem that's honestly been giving people headaches for centuries. I mean, think about it. If you've ever watched kids playing on a playground, you know we have this deeply wired instinctual aversion to obvious injustice. We just know exactly when something feels unfair in our day-to-day lives. But trying to pin down the affirmative, defining what justice actually looks like in practice, that has occupied some of the absolute greatest minds in human history. Take ancient Greece, for example. We get two incredibly foundational but kind of totally opposite views. On one hand, you've got Plato. He believed justice was basically about balance and harmony. The idea that everyone should do what they're naturally suited for, contributing their unique skills to keep society humming along perfectly. But then you have Aristotle, who looked at it completely differently. He essentially defined justice as a virtue centered on giving people exactly what they are deserving of based on what they've contributed. So right out of the gate, we're hit with this huge tension. Is fairness really about the harmony of the whole group, or is it about what the individual deserves? Moving on to Section 2, the veil of ignorance. We're going to hold on to that ancient tension and fast forward to the 20th century to see how philosopher John Rawls tried to tackle this massive dilemma. So in 1971, Rawls drops this monumental book called A Theory of Justice. His big goal was to totally eliminate the selfish bias that inevitably creeps in whenever humans try to write the rules. To pull this off, he created the original position. Think of it as a hypothetical scenario, a state of absolute equality where we have to build society's rules completely from scratch before we even exist inside that society. And here is the brilliant mechanism he uses to make this work. Imagine you have to put on a veil of ignorance. Step 1, you wipe your memory. You don't know your gender, your race, how much money you have, your intelligence, your social status. You know literally nothing about who you're going to be. Okay, step 2, from behind this total blind spot, you and everyone else have to design the rules of the game. And then step 3, the veil lifts and you actually have to live with the results. Because you have absolutely no clue if you'll end up wealthy or poor, healthy or sick, you're pretty much forced to make decisions completely impartially. Which brings us to Section 3. Justice as fairness. Because really, what kind of society would we actually build from behind that veil? Well, Rawls figured we would instantly reject any system that might throw us under the bus just to benefit somebody else. Instead, he argued we'd choose what he called justice as fairness, which boils down to a few core principles. First up is the liberty principle. This guarantees equal basic liberties for everyone, stuff like freedom of speech and thought, because, let's be real, nobody wants to risk waking up as an oppressed minority. Second is the difference principle. Rawls wasn't naive, he knew some inequality is just bound to happen, but he argued we'd only tolerate social and economic inequalities if they directly benefit the absolute worst off in society. And finally, any of those unequal, powerful positions, they have to be wide open to everyone under fair equality of opportunity. All right, Section 4, the pragmatic pivot. So Rawls essentially drew up the blueprints for a theoretical utopia. But what about the real world? Enter Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen. Sen is kind of the pragmatic mechanic to Rawls's theoretical architect. In his 2009 book, The Idea of Justice, Sen argued that Rawls was relying on something he called transcendental institutionalism. That's really just a fancy way of saying you need a perfect, abstract ideal of justice fully mapped out before you can even begin to judge society. Sen completely pushed back on this. He proposed plural grounding instead. Basically, he argued that we actually don't need a flawless transcendent ideal to spot and fix the broken institutions right in front of us. To put it simply, you don't need to know what the perfect mansion looks like to know that a burning house needs to be put out immediately. And Sen's main point here is just incredibly powerful. He believed that humans possess this deep, innate drive to eliminate obvious, remediable injustice from the world. We don't all have to share the exact same philosophy to look at a situation and agree, yeah, this is definitely less fair than that. We can actually roll up our sleeves and fix obvious wrongs together without having to perfectly agree on some far-off utopia first. Finally, our last section, Section 5, the architecture of rights. How does this very pragmatic desire to fix injustice actually translate into the real world? How do we write these protections into global law? Well, it takes us directly into human rights frameworks. And these concepts didn't just magically appear overnight. It was a massive evolution over decades. Back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, progressive-era American legal scholars started pushing hard for basic labor protections. Then, after World War I, in 1919, the International Labor Organization was founded on the explicit idea that lasting peace absolutely requires social justice. But the true turning point? That came after the unimaginable horrors of World War II. It culminated in 1948 when the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, which set a comprehensive global standard for human dignity. And what's absolutely fascinating is how beautifully this declaration is structured. A French jurist named René Cassin helped draft the UDHR, and he intentionally designed it to resemble a classic Greek temple. The foundation, Articles 1 and 2, rests entirely on basic dignity, liberty, and equality. The preamble acts as the steps leading up to the temple, laying out the historical reasons it was even built in the first place. Then you have these 4 massive columns representing specific groups of rights, everything from the right to life to civil liberties, all the way to economic and social rights. And finally, capping it all off is the pediment, the roof binding the whole thing together, which represents our mutual duties to one another. It's truly a masterpiece of moral architecture. So we've made quite the journey today, from Plato's Search for Harmony right through Rawls's Veil of Ignorance, all the way to the towering columns of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As we stand back and consider this incredible architecture of fairness we've built, the ultimate question I want to leave you with is this. If you were forced to step behind the veil of ignorance right this very second, knowing absolutely nothing about where you'd end up, what would you change about our society today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking those tough questions.